Mark Stevens ran his palm over the smooth surface of the table, feeling the subtle vibrations of voices in the courtroom. 8 years as a translator had taught him to feel the rhythm of courtroom proceedings through his fingertips, the tense silences during testimony, the sharp thuds of the judge's gavel, the rustle of lawyers' papers. Today's murder trial of Andrei Kostin, the owner of a chain of car dealerships, promised to be long and complicated. He adjusted his headphones, not because they could help him, but out of old habit. Meningitis at age 7 had taken away his hearing, but given him something else, the ability to see what was hidden from others. Every gesture, every movement of his lips, the slightest change in facial expression, all this became his language, more precise and honest than words. The door to the courtroom opened and a girl walked in, accompanied by a social worker, Anna Volkova, 19, a key witness in the case. Mark had studied her file the day before. Deaf-mute since birth, works in a printing house, lives with her grandmother in Izmailovo. The only person who saw Kostin shot dead near his home 3 weeks ago, Anna, sat down in the witness box, and Mark immediately noticed how she held herself. Not like someone who was terrified of the upcoming testimony, but like someone who knew exactly what she was going to say. Her hands were resting too calmly in her lap. Her gaze was focused, but not on the judge or the lawyers. She was looking out into the room, as if she was looking for someone in particular. Judge Petrova nodded to Mark, and he took his place next to the witness stand. This was his world, a space between two realities where he turned silence into words and gestures, into truth. At least, that was what he thought until today. The prosecutor began the interrogation with standard questions. Anna answered clearly. Her gestures were correct and understandable. Mark translated automatically, his hands moving in the familiar rhythm of Russian Sign Language. Yes, she was in the park. Yes, she saw a man near a black car. Yes, she heard. Here Mark corrected himself, translating saw flashes instead of heard shots. But when the prosecutor asked about the shooter's features, something changed. Anna began to describe her attacker, and Mark felt his confidence begin to crack. The girl used gestures he didn't recognize. At first, it was little things. A strange twist of the wrist when describing height, an unusual movement of the fingers when talking about hair color. Mark translated approximately, replacing unfamiliar signs with similar ones from the official dictionary. Perhaps these are regional peculiarities or family gestures. Such things happened, but the longer the interrogation went on, the more oddities he noticed. It was as if Anna was speaking 2 languages at once. The main story was told in clear gestures, but between them, like secret inclusions, there were signs that were not in any textbook. As the defense attorney began cross-examining, Anna became even more cautious. Her basic answers were short and precise, but her strange gestures became more frequent. Mark noticed that she made them when she looked into the courtroom, where the victim's relatives and journalists were sitting. One moment in particular alarmed him. The lawyer asked if she had seen anything else suspicious that evening. Anna answered negatively with a standard gesture, but at the the same time, her left hand, hidden from most of those present, made a quick movement. 3 short touches of the thumb to the index finger, then a clenched fist with the little finger extended. Mark translated only the main answer, but the strange gesture stuck in his memory. It seemed too deliberate, too precise to be an accident or a nervous tic. The meeting ended 2 hours later. Anna left the room in the same calm state in which she had arrived. Mark was collecting his notes when he noticed that one of the men in the room, a strong man with a tattoo on his neck, was looking at him intently. Their eyes met for a second, and the man turned away, but Mark managed to notice something in his eyes that resembled an assessment. That evening, in his apartment in Sokolniki, Mark couldn't shake the feeling that he had missed something important. He took out his notebook and tried to reproduce Anna's strange gestures. His hand moved slowly, reproducing every movement, every turn of the fingers, 3 touches, a clenched fist, little finger extended. Then another, index finger pointing down, then a quick movement of the palm across the throat, and then the same fingers folded in a certain way, which she showed when she spoke about the time of the incident. Mark turned on his computer and began searching. Perhaps it was a dialect from another region, or the specific slang of a certain group. In the deaf community, there have always been informal signs that only the initiated can understand. But the more he looked, the more he became convinced that these gestures did not belong to any form of sign language known to him. They were too clear, too structured to be improvisation, and too secretive to be normal communication. Around midnight, Mark put down his notebook and rubbed his tired eyes. There was another hearing on the case tomorrow, and Anna had to give additional testimony. Perhaps he was simply overtired and seeing problems where there were none. Perhaps the girl was simply nervous and making unconscious movements. But deep down, Mark knew that wasn't true. Over 8 years of work, he had learned to distinguish deliberate gestures from random movements. And what he had seen in the courtroom today was definitely deliberate. Anna Volkova was hiding something, and her silence said more than any words could. He looked at his reflection in the dark window. For the first time in his life, a man whose profession was built on the absolute accuracy of the transmission of information doubted that he understood what he saw correctly. And this doubt frightened him more than any secret the witness might be hiding. The next morning, Mark woke up feeling like he hadn't slept at all. Anna's strange gestures were playing in his head like an obsessive melody. He made coffee and opened his notebook again. In the daylight, his sketches looked even more mysterious. The lines and arrows that indicated hand movements seemed like a code he couldn't decipher. Mark decided to start with something simple. Contact his colleagues from the community of translators. Elena Morozova had been working in the Moscow City Court for 15 years and knew all the intricacies of regional dialects of sign language. If anyone could explain the strange behavior of Anna, it was she. They met in a cafe near the Kitai-Gorod metro station. Elena carefully studied Mark's notes, frowning more and more with each page. "Mark, this isn't a dialect," she said, pushing the pad away. "Or family gestures. See how structured the movements are. It's a system, organized and deliberate. System of what? Elena paused, clearly wondering whether she should continue. A few years ago, I worked on a drug trafficking case. There was also a deaf witness there, and he used similar signs. Then the investigator explained to me that in the criminal environment, there are secret codes for transmitting information. This is especially convenient in places where surveillance is conducted, in courts, prisons, during interrogations. Elena's words hit Mark like a physical blow, so his suspicions were justified. Anna really was hiding something. Do you remember that investigator? Of course. Igor Semenov currently works in the Department for Combating Organized Crime. I can give you contacts. In the evening, Mark met Semenov in a small bar on Patriarch's Ponds. The investigator turned out to be a man of about 45, with tired eyes and a habit of speaking in a low voice. Signal codes in the criminal environment are nothing new, Semenov explained, looking at Mark's notes. They are especially popular among groups involved in arms and drug trafficking. It is convenient to transmit information right in front of you. Law enforcement. Are these specific gestures familiar to you? Semenov pointed to one of the drawings. This one is a time designation, but not a normal one. It's a code for making an appointment. And this, he pointed to another symbol, means danger or be careful. Mark felt a chill run down his spine, so she wasn't transmitting readings, but instructions. It looks like it. Tell me, were there people in the room who could understand these signs? Mark remembered the man with the tattoo on his neck who had been looking at him so intently. Perhaps. Semenov closed his notebook and looked at Mark seriously. Listen, if your suspicions are correct, then you're in a very unpleasant situation. These people don't joke. Maybe you should pass the information on to us and keep your distance. But Mark couldn't stop. At home, he turned on his computer and began to study Kostin's case in more detail. Official materials were scant, but more information was found on the internet. Kostin did own a chain of car dealerships, but judging by some publications, his business was not entirely clean. Several articles hinted at connections to money laundering and car smuggling. Then Mark decided to look for information about Anna Volkova. Her social media profile was almost empty. A few photos with her grandmother, notes about working in a printing house. But he found something interesting in her friends list. Alexei Volkov, 24. Judging by the photos, Anna's older brother. Mark delved into his profile and discovered a completely different picture. Expensive cars, restaurants, photos with people who clearly did not work in printing houses. The last entry was made a year ago. A search of news reports yielded results. Alexei Volkov died in a car accident on Leningradskoye Shosse last March. Officially, he lost control on a slippery road, but in the comments to the news, people wrote that the car exploded too violently for a normal accident. Mark leaned back in his chair, trying to put the puzzle together. Anna was not a random witness. Her brother was involved in crime and died under suspicious circumstances. Kostin's murder could have been revenge or part of a larger showdown. Anna's testimony in court was a way to pass information to accomplices, using Mark as an unwitting intermediary. He remembered the girl's strange gestures and tried to interpret them in a new context. 3 touches, perhaps the time of the meeting. A clenched fist with a little finger, a warning of danger. A movement across the throat, a threat or an indication of the next target. The thought that his translations might help plan new crimes was unbearable. Mark had spent his life proud of the precision of his work, the honesty with which he conveyed every word and gesture. Now that honesty could turn into complicity in murder. He looked at his watch. 1:30 in the morning. Tomorrow at 10 in the morning, the hearings on Costin's case are scheduled to continue. Anna will testify again, and Mark will again find himself between 2 worlds, official justice and the secret language of criminals. But now he knew what to pay attention to. Every gesture, every movement of Anna's hands would be under his close observation. The only question was what he would do with this information. Mark took out his phone and dialed Semenov's number, but did not call. So far, he did not have 100% proof, only suspicions and guesses. Tomorrow's meeting was supposed to dot all the I's. He closed the laptop and tried to fall asleep, but sleep wouldn't come. Images swirled in his head. Anna with her calm face and secret gestures. The tattooed man who was watching the events too closely. The car exploding on Leningradskoye Chaussee. Mark understood that tomorrow his life could change dramatically. For 8 years, he had been just a translator, a bridge between worlds. Now he had to become something more, either a judge or an accomplice, and he would have to make this choice tomorrow, in the courtroom, under the gaze of people for whom his decision could mean life or death. Mark woke up this morning with the clear understanding that today would be different. He showered, shaved his face, and put on his best suit, the navy blue one he wore only to the most important meetings. Today was definitely that day. In the metro, he reread his notes several times, memorizing every strange gesture of Anna. In his pocket lay a folded piece of paper, a note he had written to Judge Petrova. Simple words about the witness using secret signs and a request to pay attention to her behavior, but whether to give it to her or not, Mark had not yet decided. The courtroom looked the same as yesterday, but the atmosphere was different. Mark noticed more people in the gallery, including the man with the tattoo. Today he was sitting closer to the exit, and his gaze kept moving between Mark and the witness box. Anna walked in with the same calm gait, but Mark now saw what he had missed before. Her eyes quickly scanned the room, stopping at familiar faces. It was not the fear of a witness, but the calculation of a professional. Judge Petrova opened the hearing, and the prosecutor began additional questioning. The questions touched on details that had not been discussed yesterday: the exact time, the weather conditions, other people in the park. Anna answered clearly, but Mark already knew what to look for. The first secret gesture appeared 10 minutes later, answering the question about how many shots she had seen. Anna showed the standard 3, but at the same time her left hand made the same movement, 3 touches of the thumb to the index finger. translated only the main answer, but the note in his pocket seemed to burn him. The prosecutor then asked if she had noticed anything suspicious after the murder. Anna answered negatively, but immediately made a gesture that Semenov interpreted as danger. Her gaze was directed at the man with the tattoo. Mark felt his heartbeat quicken. Anna wasn't just relaying information, she was coordinating. Her testimony was a cover for real communication with her accomplices. When the defense attorney began cross-examining, the situation became critical. He asked whether Anna could have misidentified the shooter because of poor lighting. The girl said she was sure of what she saw, but at the same time she made a complex combination of gestures, pointing her index finger down, moving it across her throat, then pointing toward the judge's table. Mark realized that this was a threat, not just the passing of information, but a direct threat to someone in the room, perhaps the judge, perhaps himself. His hand reached for the note in his pocket. A few more seconds and he could have handed it to the judge without being seen. But at that moment, Anna looked straight at him. There was no plea or fear in her eyes, only cold assessment. She knew he understood her gestures. Mark made a decision. He took out a note and, taking advantage of the pause in the interrogation, handed it to the bailiff with a request to give it to the judge. Petrova read the note, frowned, and looked closely at Anna. "Witness," said the judge, "I ask you to keep your hands visible and to refrain from making unnecessary movements while you testify." Anna nodded, but something like rage flashed in her eyes. She realized that she had been found out. The interrogation continued, but Anna was more careful now. The secret gestures stopped, but the atmosphere in the room became tense. The man with the tattoo looked at Mark several times, and there was a threat in those looks. After the end of the session, Mark lingered in the courtroom, waiting for all the visitors to leave. Judge Petrova approached him. "Mark Alexandrovich, thank you for the information. We will pass the materials on to the investigation. You may have to give additional testimony." "I'm ready," Mark replied, although he was far from ready for everything. As he was leaving the courthouse, he noticed a man with a tattoo waiting for him at the entrance. Mark quickened his pace, but the man caught up with him. "Translator, the Shui," man said quietly, "you have made a big mistake. I was just doing my job. Your job is to translate, not to poke your nose into other people's business. Remember that." The man turned and walked away, but the threat hung in the air. The next few days passed in tense anticipation. Mark was summoned to the prosecutor's office, where he gave a detailed account of Anna's strange gestures and their possible meaning. The investigators were grateful for the information and assured him that they would take all measures for his safety. A week later, news arrived. Anna Volkova was arrested on suspicion of complicity in the murder and passing information to a criminal group. During a search of her apartment, they found recordings of sign language codes and correspondence with people connected to Kostin's murder. It turned out that the murder was revenge for her brother's death, and her testimony in court was a way to coordinate the group's actions. Mark was suspended from work during the investigation, but he returned to his duties a month later. The commission recognized his actions as lawful and even awarded him a commendation for assisting justice. But something had changed in him forever now. When translating testimony in court, Mark did not simply convey words and gestures. He analyzed them, looked for hidden meanings, paid attention to what might have previously passed him by. Language ceased to be just a tool for transmitting information for him. It became a weapon that could both protect the truth and distort it. Sometimes, late at night, Mark wondered what would have happened if he had kept silent. How many people might have suffered from crimes that were coordinated right in the courtroom? But he also knew that his choice had come at a price. He was now forever caught between two worlds, knowing too much about how thin the line between truth and lies is. The code of silence had been broken, but Mark Stevens had learned to speak a language that was more honest than any words, the language of justice, and that was more important than all the secret gestures in the world.